Hi, and after a long hiatus, here I am for a new video. Today's video would be on deploying a Virtualbox image of Ubuntu 24.04 using best practices. Okay, so if you haven't already, you can visit virtualbox.org/wiki/downloads or just type Virtualbox into Google. And you can go to the download section here, and that will lead you to the VirtualBox download options. Most of us will be using Windows host, so if you click Windows in here, it will download the installer, and you can just do it basically a pretty simple next finish. I've kind of covered that in previous videos anyway. The next thing we need to do is actually download Ubuntu itself, so we need to download the ISO image for that. If you go to Google and just literally search for Ubuntu, and the first thing that will come up will be, if you go to products and Ubuntu server, you'll get the download Ubuntu server option, and this is a long-term support version, so it's probably a great one to go for. You do have some instant VMs for other provisioning formats, but let's just go with this one, and we can just literally click download. The server comes without a GUI, so it's generally more lightweight and better for testing and stuff. You can obviously install the desktop version if you wanted a UI, and the steps will be relatively similar. The only differences will be it'll be mouse and keyboard when you do the installation, which is generally easier anyway. Okay, so let's go to VirtualBox. I've already installed. I've already downloaded the ISO a moment ago. Okay, so let's go ahead and click new and give it a name. So whatever you want to call it. So I'll just go for Ubuntu -server. That's the install where the VirtualBox VM will be. So you just got to make sure you have space required. I'm going to give it a 50 gig disk, so I need to make sure I have 50 gig available in that area. And then I've got to select the ISO image. So if I just go down arrow and select other, and then select the ISO image I just downloaded, which is 2404, and it should be AMD 64 in most cases. Right, you can do an unintended installation. I don't recommend this because there's some bits and pieces you can actually tune here, so I will go here and skip that. We can go into expert mode if we wanted to, but it's not worth doing it in here. So if you go next, we want to set the memory to something 6 gig, and how many CPUs you want to give it. I'll give it 4 CPUs, and also enable EFI. And now we've got the virtual disk, so I'm just going to select that to 50 gig as I mentioned earlier. Pre-allocate means it will use the space right now. It may be good, it may not. For performance reasons you probably want to do that, but for the sake of doing virtual machines and stuff, it's not worth doing, so just don't tick it. Okay, so make sure all that looks good and click finish. So it's going to have selected most of these things for you. We can go into settings and review what is set up. So we've got Ubuntu, which makes sense. It's going to store snapshots. We can turn these things on later once we've installed the VMware, the VirtualBox tools. Disk encryption we could enable here, though we can actually enable it at the looks side, so they're on the actual LVM on the disk. We don't need the floppy option for boot, so we can move optical all the way to the top. Chips, we could potentially enable the TPM if we wanted to use TPM protection, so I'll enable TPM v2 on my device, so that means you can store the encryption key on the TPM. We can enable secure boot, and processor, we've got all that in there. These ones depend on your processor if it supports it. In most cases, we don't really need it. Video memory, it's not really got a GUI, but I might as well put it up to the max. I've only got one here. We don't need 3D acceleration because I'm not going to do anything 3D. Remote display and recording all turned off. It's fine. That looks all good. Audio, I'm not really bothered about audio, so I'll turn it off. So all these things can save resources and also additional drivers and whatnot, so it's probably a good thing. We've got a network adapter enabled. That's all good, and the cable connecting. We can set up port forwarding on here. We'll do that later. We'll do it once we get a bit further on. I don't need any serial ports. USB 2 is fine, and I won't do any of that yet. So let's click OK. That looks all right. We've already got my ISO connected, so let's launch it. Just make that full screen. Okay, awesome. So it's just doing its loading up now. So this is like the live instance of the OS. This is not actually installing as of yet. Okay, so now this is pretty self-explanatory. So select your language. I will select perhaps English, and because I want the keyboard as English US. Okay, I'll select English US. That's fine. Did I have English Australian better? And use the English Australian keyboard. Great. So that's correct. So I'll just do that. Okay. So now we're going to use the up arrows to select here which version we want. You can also do the minimize, but that means you may have to install lots of packages later on. Most cases you can use the server, but if you want to be secure and have only the packages you very need, you could do a minimized installation. You've also got the option to install third-party drivers. If you're going to use FIPS accreditation on the host, then you probably want to you won't want to enable this, or the real-time kernel. These are very specific use cases. You won't want to tick that box. I don't have a use for it either, so I'll just leave it unselected. Here is our network interface. We can see it's picked up an IP, which is a good sign. We can give it a different name if you really want to. I'm not going to bother. You can obviously create bonded interfaces if you wanted to as well here. If you use a proxy, you'll have to put the proxy server details in here. You can see also the form of it. So it'll be HTTP user password at host and port. It's now going to do a connectivity check. So obviously that will check your proxy configuration if you had to enable that, but also checking all your network config is good and happy. I can see it's passed the test, so far so good. Okay, so I've got use the entire disk. I've got that disk selected. You want to make sure that this is your disk you want. You're not going to overwrite something that you need. You're going to set it up as LVM group. That's pretty a good idea. And to encrypt it with LUKS means you'll have to enter passphrase as part of the boot up. So it means that will be encrypted using this passphrase. Obviously, that'll be something you have to remember. Otherwise, if it's forgotten, then you won't be able to boot up the OS or recover anything from the system at all because it'll be totally encrypted. So obviously set a decent password here, but you might want to record it somewhere so you can recover from it. It's also going to create a recovery key, so that'll be something you want to record and store somewhere. Okay, so it's going to create storage configuration. Just let it at least create that one. And what you want to do is, you can see here it's got 3 mount points. We've got a root mount, which are basically where the OS will sit, the boot, and then you've got the boot EFI, which is basically part of the boot process. We've got a volume group for the device, which has 23 gig of space. The volume group here. We've also got a logical volume, which is the /root mount, and we have the free partitions listed as well. So that PV of the LVM group is using up 46 gig, and it actually has free space of 23 gig. So let's go create a logical volume. We can call it whatever we want. I'll kind of match the format here. It's up to you. You can rename it all as you want it to. So I'll just call it HM. Size, we'll leave it as the max. We can select a format. Personally, ext4 has been brilliant and it's never had many issues. You've got different mounts. You could, I have seen before people move the var onto a different directory, but what that does cause, I've seen as well, is when the var log gets full, the OS is unable to boot. So I generally don't recommend that. It's better to have it all together, but there will be some, we'll go through some recommendations later on regards to that, and we can move stuff around, but let's just do a standard installation pretty much here. Okay, so we've got all of these set up. That looks good. We're using 23 gig on each, so if I click done, it's just getting you to confirm with a red to make sure you're sure for that. Okay, so now you're going to put your profile configuration. So I'll just pop my name in here, server name. Okay, my username, password. Excellent. Right. There is actually something called Ubuntu Pro. We will do that as well. So for personal use, you can actually enable Ubuntu Pro, which actually gets security updates for more packages. It also provides, does live patching as well, which is fantastic. So that means you don't have to necessarily check for updates. It's going to try and patch them, those critical ones, as soon as possible, regardless of whether you actually run the patching or not. So it's just a really good idea. So go continue. So I'll just go get a token. So what you'll do is go to that website, ubuntu.com/pro/attach, and then you'll have to either log in or create your Ubuntu One account. It's completely free. And then once you get through that, you then need to potentially go back to the attached website and then enter your code, which is the code displayed there, which in my case is KIVRNV. Pop it into the website and select free personal token up to 5 machines and click submit. And it should then say successfully attached. And you can see my message is now your token is successfully added to your subscription. You can see enabled services. So I'll click continue. If you want to use SSH to connect to server rather than use console, which I highly recommend, tick that. You could potentially have specific SSH keys already added. We're going to just use password login for now and just click done. These are the different server snaps to pre-install. Some of these are pretty useful. Kind of depends what you use, but for example, Docker is a common tool you may have. You've also got things like PowerShell, AWS CLI, Google Cloud SDK. So a lot of these can be really pretty cool. But in this case, again, I'll just click done. And basically it will be installing now, and we can actually look at the log as it goes along. You can see it's currently configuring the server. It's already got to the installation part now. So as you can see, it's already installed, which is really good. We can click view for log and we can review that if you wanted to. And you can just use the arrow keys to scroll up and down with that. And then the tab key to get back to the close button. I'll click reboot. You may get this message. Just hit enter and it'll reboot. Okay, so you see that please unlock disk. That's where he wants to put in your Lux key. Looks good. Yeah, you'll see it move on the startup if the key is correct. First boot definitely will take a little bit longer than a standard boot. So we should be able to log in with the username and password we created earlier. Looks good. Should be able to also sudo. Excellent. So now we just check for any updates. This is the first thing we've got to do. So apt update. Upgrade. And you can see there's two updates. And they should install in no time. But yeah, it's important even when we first install that we get the updates done. Awesome. Okay, so I'll just get out of the full screen of this. Let's go and set up port forwarding so we can do the rest of the items directly from SSH. So we go up here and port forwarding and click plus. Host IP will be basically a local host. So that the port you want to forward, it's a Windows machine, so it won't be listening on 22. Guest IP will be, let me get the guest IP. Damn, I think it will be 10.0.2.15. I think I saw. I'll just have to double check that. And 22 will be the port for the SSH. So click OK. Let me just now recheck. Yeah, 0215 I think. So let me just double check. I set it up okay. Port forwarding 0215, port 22. Okay. So that should work. Yep. Excellent. So I'm now connected to the host, which is great. Much easier to manage inside this than in the console. Next thing we need to do is set up Virtualbox. Okay, so we'll need called Essential and Linux headers. And then it'll be hyphen, and we want to get the name of the kernel. So we can do uname -r. And you can see it's picked up the build essential, and we should have Linux headers somewhere here. Linux header. Oh, we've already got it installed. There we go. So it's only the build essential which we need. Okay, so next thing is to mount the ISO if it hasn't already. I think I mounted it earlier. Insert image. Okay, let's mount the CD-ROM in here. So let's get the block ID. So it's dev sr1. So let's make sudo make dir mount CD-ROM. Okay, and then mount dev sr0 to mount CD-ROM. Oops. Oh, there we go. I forget sudo. Cool, no worries. It will be. And then we should have, yep. Awesome. Now we just want to sudo vbox linux additions.run. And now it would go ahead and try and install. Yep, so because we've got secure boot on, we need to do a enrollment of a new mock or machine owner key. So basically, yeah, you need to reboot once with the enrollment, and we got a code we need to, basically pin we need to set to enable it. So we'll set it here. Set it to something relatively simple for that one-time boot, essentially. I'd just set it to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, but you could probably do something a bit more secure. Let's just do a cd reboot. Okay. So we go back in here now. Let's do this in the console. So we can say enroll mock. We can see the key. We can see it was generated just now. We click continue. Say yes. It's going to ask for the password. And We can now reboot. It's going to ask for the key. Just make sure everything's happy. We can do a sudo systemctl list units type equals service, and we can see there's no red essentially, which is a good sign. We can see everything's loaded, active, and either exited, which is fine. In some cases, nothing needs to be running all the time, and we can see most of it's loaded and active, which is good. So yeah, nothing to worry about in here, which is great. So that pretty much concludes the basic setup of a Ubuntu server. We will then go ahead and configure it for the based on CAS benchmark for Ubuntu in the following videos. Thank you for watching.